All right, we're live. Peter, here we are. Nothing holding us back.
No
Nothing,
edits.
no edits. Let's not try and say anything like terribly racist. Let's try and keep it like on the racist scale, one being your mother and then 10 being Hitler. Let's stay at around a 7. That
Yeah,
seems
all right.
safe.
Sure. I don't think we ever really stray much deeper than that.
Welcome to the live stream edition of Voyager, please, celebrating the end of our watch of season 1 of Star Trek Voyager. And if for some reason you've stumbled across this and you're like, who the fuck are these two assholes? We've already done like 15 or 16 episodes reviewing each of the installments of Voyager season 1 and making savage fun of it all. So I encourage you to go back and check that out. But Peter, we made it, dude. We made it.
I would call it the end of the ordeal of season 1.
Yeah, it was rough at times.
I'm sitting there reviewing all my notes, getting prepped for this thing. I feel like this episode is more of a high school or a college exam. Like, I actually have my notebook. I took it to work with me, and I'm sitting there on like my lunch break studying my old notes. I was like, what the hell is my life? How did this happen?
I also took extensive notes, but because I edited the podcast, I had to listen to each of them twice. So I have everything that we said kind of like haunting my dreams. That's at least what my therapist says. Also, my therapist says I'm not going to forget that shithead episode, until I pay another like $2,000 worth of sessions. So,
yeah.
But I'm pleased that we've been able to make it, my friend. It's a journey, just a little background, I guess, for people that don't know or have become fans of this but don't know what we've done before. Peter and I have podcasted in the past, in the ancient past of primitive podcasting. We did something for a subculture gaming group that we were in that was popular amongst that group. I want to say you were probably we started in 2006. I think you were probably involved with it. What, 2010?
I don't know. It was a long time ago. It's funny too. I mean, had we stayed with it, I mean, I think we might have actually been a pretty big deal. Like, we were in the podcast game, maybe even before it was even called a podcast.
Yeah, it was a podcast then because it came along at the same time as the iPod, so it was definitely a term that was out there. But we did that off and on for, I want to say, 3 or 4 years after we expanded the team to include you. But we said from the beginning, man, we need to do like another one that's like Star Trek focused, because we instantly bonded over the fact that we're huge Trek nerds. And back then there wasn't all the robust kind of remote tools. We had to actually be in the same place at the same time. Shit was weird. And we couldn't make it work because we live a couple hours apart, but keep coming up a little bit here and there. And eventually, it came up in discussion again, a few months ago. And I'm like, I think we can actually do it this time. And sure enough, we've been able to pull it off. And it's been a lot of fun.
No regrets. Well, I was going to say no regrets. I think there's a lot of regrets. There's a season 1 full of regrets. I've had fun in my regret.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I kind of dragged you into doing Voyager for this, because we had all these ideas for what we were going to do for our Star Trek podcast. And mine was, let's do episode reviews of Star Trek Voyager. And you're like, but why?
Yes, but why?
And my point was, A, it's something no one has done.
Mm-hmm.
And B, it's this weird unloved child that is unloved for a reason, and bad makes for comedy.
My concern from the outset, and why I think I ultimately endorsed your decision to go with Voyager, was I was worried that had we gone with one of the other franchises, our podcast might have been too good.
Or we've been slobbering all over the show's balls, like, oh yes, DS9, yes, I love you. Let me get that whole shaft down my throat. Like, Voyager allows us to have some sort of level of like comedic distance, as if to say, occasionally it can be good, but mostly it's not. So we can take a step back and make all of the dick jokes that we can think of, and that's important. So one thing that we are doing this evening is Peter and I, we are lucky enough that we don't want to do this for any other reason than we just want to entertain people. So in lieu of wanting to solicit for any kind of money or donations or anything like that, we would ask if you have enjoyed the show for the first season. We have a GoFundMe that I've put a link to in the chat, and I've linked to in our Facebook group and on our Facebook page. It's for an acquaintance of both of Peter and I. She has unfortunately got a pretty devastating medical diagnosis recently, and she and her family are going to have to be dealing with that. And as we all know, that's incredibly expensive and difficult to deal with, even when it's not something that is very, very much life-threatening. So if you are feeling generous and you have enjoyed the show, click on the link and donate whatever it is that you feel that you can donate. Everyone involved will appreciate it. We will certainly appreciate it as well. So on that note, Peter, where would you like to go first? Would you like to do some...
I want to go first to shout out to the viewers that we might have sitting at home. Unlike our normal shows, we're actually running this one through Google Hangouts, YouTube type deal. Mm-hmm. So I can't see how many people we might have in our chat room. Do you?
Yes, I do. It's 2. Not telling us. 2 other people.
Joe, I was hoping you'd lie and be like, we got like 200. So to the 2 people who are good enough to come out, who we got in there, Joe?
I don't know who they are. I just know that they're viewers. They might make themselves known now that we've pointed out there are 2 of them. But you 2, whoever you 2 are, you're the best.
You are the real super fans out there. Anyway, yeah, but so they're in a chat room, and maybe we'll get some more out there. We'll see. To the 2 lonely souls, feel free to jump in with any questions or comments you might have. We're here for you on this one. We've got some of our own material ready to go, but love to take some participation from the swarthing crowd of listeners we got out there right now.
Yeah, we've got Cabrith has chimed in on the chat on the chat. Hashtag #1fan, and indeed, that may be the only comment we get. So, you the man/woman. I don't know. It's gender neutral. I say we hand out some awards, Peter. Let's hand out some end of season 1 awards. Rest in peace, season 1. We've got quite a few options that were presented by the Facebook group, and
yeah, I jump-started with some pretty hateful suggestions, and people ran with it very hard.
They did. I'd like to start like from bottom to top in terms of those that were receiving votes. And number 1 on my list that I think we need to consider, Best B'Elanna Torres Temper Tantrum Award.
Let's see, what are our options to choose from? There's the temper tantrum shortly after she broke Joe Carey's nose and then vehemently threw a tin cup at Chakotay's ankle. That's 1.
There's that. That's 1. Number 2, of course, would be in Caretaker when she flipped out first on the Ocampan doctors that were trying to help her with her space syphilis that was never cured. And then sort of also flipped out on Harry Kim, where she was like in her bathrobe thing that they all had on, and she was just like being stereotypically angry. And then I guess you'd also have to give Faces its due. There was definitely some temper there from Klingon B'Elanna wanting to basically murder everybody.
I'm going to give my award for the best B'Elanna Torres flip out moment to what was that terrible Space Baby one? No, it wasn't Space Baby. It was one of the bad time travel dilation ones where she's getting eyeballed for a promotion and Janeway calls her into the ready room and kind of like tries to feel her out a little bit, and she basically storms off on Janeway and with this "I don't want your stupid job anywhere" attitude.
Yeah, that's Parallax. That's the one with it's not the exact temper tantrum where she throws the like ashtray at Chakotay's ankle. But it was the bad HR moment from that episode, and I agree. That's a strong choice. But I'm going to give it to the premiere because nothing quite like introducing your character by pointlessly Star Trek fighting with the only Asian left in the Delta Quadrant. It was just like classic Trek fighting with like both hands, over the back. Really started out strong. I liked that.
A lot of spunk in that one.
So what awards would you like to hand out next, Peter?
Let me pull up my list here. So many good ones to choose from. Joe, I want to ask you, what do you think your most 90s moment in the show was?
The most 90s moment? Mm-hmm. That would absolutely have to be the obsession with Chakotay's Indian heritage. That is such an artifact of the 90s. Like that whole mode that that a Native American spirituality is like this curiosity, not to be treated like a serious spiritual belief, but that it's like cultural tourism, for the lack of a better phrase. That is a 90s trope across all mediums, and Voyager does it best / worse than anybody.
Good call. I think it's
Air Jordans were a tight second, though.
Those Air Jordans 10, I just threw the link up for on there. I don't know why I can't shake that. Star Trek was using. In my high school, Air Jordans were a big deal, so I just find it very appropriate or funny that Star Trek used them in their little thing. For my 90s moment award, I'm going to say nothing's going to beat out the pilot when we got a nice screen full of the Ocampa Sanctuary Mall escalator.
It really set the tone for the rest of the show, that they had key expository dialogue in their pilot episode on a fucking shopping mall escalator somewhere in LA. That's what it looked like. It's like they were going to the fucking Apple store. I'm sorry, no, it's the 90s. I guess they were going to like fucking Sears. I guess that would
Babbage's.
Babbage's, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, let's go ahead and break down everything that's happened to us since we got catapulted to get across the galaxy. It was such a bizarre choice. It was absolutely batshit. And it informed the sort of laziness that made season 1 what it was. I guess let's take a second to talk about that. What was your impression of season 1 overall? What did you think of it?
I'm split, man. Like, I didn't hate it as much as I thought I was. Like, I thought there were some genuinely excellent episodes in this season, but there's a very good reason, I think, why I didn't watch this show when it initially came out, and there's a lot of crap to wade through to get to the good stuff. And when we're going through and watching these, we're not doing so as regular viewers. Like, you and I are going to watch all these things regardless, all these episodes. So for me, a good episode isn't always good TV or great acting. Sometimes it's just being a Trek fan, it's a good resource episode, like Learning Curve, which was the finale. And not really good episode, but it fills in a lot of holes in Trek lore for me. It gets some good background on technology and other stuff, and it's a good resource episode. And there's a few of those, but overall, I can't excuse
that noise was perfect to describe my own feelings. That sort of like half-hearted sigh. Voyager had, like, I would say they had one really good episode in the entire first season. Like, genuinely good Trek. Like, start to finish, well written, well paced, good 44-minute story. Like, no problems. They had one of those. But they didn't have as much shit as I thought, like, this my ancestral memory told me. Or it's like maybe like that I'd gleaned from other people's reactions. I remembered a lot of the episodes in part, but watching through it all again and having got my wife watched all of them with me, so I had her kind of fresh perspective as well. It was just a lot of mediocrity, would be the operative term. It was really just kind of most of the time, and there was a couple episodes were on the high side of and there were a couple episodes on the low side of and there was like a couple real garbage moments. The ex post facto, the shitheads, that sort of thing. But overall, I kind of came through it like,
And again, this isn't a Star Trek franchise that existed, where they'd knock the rust off. Like, this is full stride, next gen wrapped amazingly. DS9's hitting it hard. So for them to come in and stumble, and I don't know, man, just some really bad decisions at the top management level. We've got some comments going on in our chat room over here. I went ahead and joined, so we should now have three people, one of which being me.
That's good. That's good. Yeah.
Cabrath asking, what episode? I think he's referring to what did you think the great episode was? And I'm going to have to say that, well, let's go ahead and bust that out right now, and I'll let you explain it. I think I know what it's going to be, but what are you going to call your best episode for this season?
Eye the Needle by far. No doubt, no question. It was the best episode in the entire season. It was the only one I would say qualified as quality Trek without reservation. It was a tight narrative. It had just one A story, no B plot. The way they wrote it actually used a kind of sense of symmetry among the characters to try and convey the story. It was a conundrum that had internal logic. And the way it basically made it so that, you continued on with the show without it actually getting them home had like a gut punch, and then it had a follow-up gut haymaker that you just kind of got stuck with at the end in a way that was well paced and well delivered. A great television episode and a great Trek episode. Acting was good. And in some ways, that episode represented the show's potential, the potential of the premise and the potential of the people they have on the show, which kind of makes the mediocre and then shit that comes later all the more frustrating. What about you? What's your favorite?
Well, I want to talk about this before we move on. Voyager, again, on paper, and we've said it a few times now, wild potential. I mean, just you and me bullshit and shooting from the hip as we've gone through these and rewritten a couple episodes on the air. Super great foundation for some really, really cool stuff. And just from what I've seen so far, and maybe they'll fix it later on in the series, it's a lot of failure to deliver on tremendous promise. I think you're right, and I think that Needle is probably the best episode out of this. But I'm going to give my award to. I'm going to have to give it to the Skeevians, man. Prime Factors. I don't know what it was about it. It just scratched a lot of deep itches. A lot of the frustrations that I've had with the show, I think they walked through in that episode. They did a great job of setting up some logical progressions of arguments that I in the audience was starting to make, and then did a great job delivering on them. And it was a really good episode of everything going wrong, a lot of risk, and ultimately no rewards. So it was an episode that stung. And then, from a podcasting standpoint, Vlad Goldblum turned into comedy gold. It was very
that first 15 minutes of that episode was absolutely delightful. Mm-hmm. I knew watching it, I could see the jokes just like bursting, like my mind was expanding.
Yeah,
to know things that I didn't already know. I mean,
it was like an appetizer of atomic warheads just puckering your mouth with shit, and then all of a sudden, taking a nice drink of water and clearing away the crap and getting into a really good episode.
I agree that the Prime Factors was on the high side of adequate for me. Mostly because of the B'Elanna, Seska, Joe Carey part.
Conspiracy, yeah.
Yeah, but I really episodes succeed or fail for me sometimes on the hinge of what they do with Janeway. And that was a really shitty episode for her and how they wrote her and had her approach what was going on. Like, when they have her be the captain, she's really great. When they have her be the sensitive lady who has to like be all locked on her fifis, I'm just grown. But I would say that's definitely among the better episodes of the season. What would be the worst one for you, Peter? I know what mine is. What's yours?
I think it's gonna have to be the. Oh, geez. Let me. So many to pick from. God, dude. How do I pick a worst?
FYI, when you Google Vlad Goldblum, this podcast is the first 3 results.
Wow, all the uses of
we got that cornered, my friend.
Yeah. Thanks, Google. I don't know, Vlad Goldblum and the Skeevians. I think that could be a pretty cool T-shirt if we like stage it out like a band. Like, it'll be my band.
Like playing a guitar on the back.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm gonna go as much as I want to go time and again for my worst. And I just got a recommendation out from the audience, Emanations, which I hated until and I'll give Joe a little bit of credit. The more I thought on it, the better it came. But I don't think I'm ready to put it in the good category. I think I got to go with Ex Post Facto.
I stole it out right out my brain. I was going to say the same thing.
Ex Post Facto was the one where Tom Paris ends up on the planet of shitheads in one of the most cockamamie plots. I think they really had the... I almost jumped into season 2 with that goddamn 37s.
Yeah, sorry. We already recorded our episode for season 2, episode 1, because I'm having some surgery, so we wanted to get ahead of the game. And we're not going to come to a stringing success at the gate. It's a little teaser. For me, it's there's a competition for worst episode of season 1 between Ex Post Facto and Time and Again, which were the 3rd and 4th episode respectively. Remember, so we had like time stuff back to back, like 3 times in a row. Is part of the main issue of what's going on, and Time and Again was the one was the candy corn tragedy, where they're like on a planet, and it just so happens that the alien is exactly looks like humans, except in the laziest fucking costumes ever, and the plot just seems very unfocused, and people just do things for things that for no reason. And Chakotay's like super into Kess's shit, and there's no explanation as to why. And we get to see Janeway get cocked in the mouth, and it's like the best part.
Yeah, she gets blasted. The best part of that episode, hands down, is when they approach the weakest riot you've ever seen, and the cops start shooting the gun, and like people go to get away, and Janeway just rolls right up on this cop shooting a gun and gets busted across the jaw with a space nightstick.
But to me, Ex Post Facto is still worse for one reason.
Yeah.
The shitheads. Like, that alien design is astonishingly bad.
Well, let's go ahead and jump. Let's just jump right in right now to one of the higher rated questions we had for an award. The worst alien species, which I think you're going to have to agree with me on this one. Hands down. And I actually had to go onto Wikipedia and look up what the shitheads really were. They're the banana, banana, B-A-N-A. They're the shitheads, man. He's the guy who, like, birds have swooped in and scooped up piles of different types of animal poop and caked them around the face and then tucked feathers and, like, 90s hair wisps out of them. Not only are they revolt... I'll give the costume department props for making something genuinely disgusting that I didn't want to look at. A pretty good alien design, but not only were they ugly as hell on screen, but just stupid. And the
costume design too, and the furniture and the rooms, like they went out of their way for that whole episode to look like just garbage.
Yeah. Cabreth out there in our chat room I had a good conversation with him. He pointed, I checked out of Ex Post Facto, so at all the episodes, I've got like maybe half a page of notes, and I usually average a full page to 2 pages of notes on these episodes. I checked the fuck out on this thing.
If I recall correctly, I think you told me like you didn't remember the second half of the episode or like a middle portion of it because you just didn't give a shit.
Yeah. Can I touch on some key elements with this that were pointed out to me?
Please.
The whole technology on this episode came down to guilty parties in a murder being impregnated with a reoccurring memory of the victim's last few moments before they got killed as kind of a tormenting punishment, right?
That is correct. That was the whole plot line.
And the plot is ultimately that secret technology was being traded illegally by the shitheads, by a shithead defector to their enemy, the Ninja Turtles, Turtles, Turd, poop,
right?
Poop people, also poop people, and that they were going to use Paris as a patsy to smuggle information off the planet in his memory.
Correct.
So, Cabreth hits the nail on the head with these things. So the shitheads have the technology to A, read and copy memories, right? Mm-hmm. Then implant memories, then alter memories to the point where obnoxious data stream floats inside the memories. Number 4, you can trigger these memories on a cyclical timer and force the person to see them. Mm-hmm. And all these technologies are wrapped up in some unseen magical device that's off camera at all times. Mm-hmm. And it makes the whole premise of needing Starfleet to smuggle that shit off world pointless, because instead of making it a murder, you could have just made it look like the alien doctor died of an accident, because they can rewrite these memories. The coroner is going to say, well, it looks like this guy slipped and fell on a knife while getting it from the kitchen, and his wife, who's also part of the conspiracy, says he did. Let's check the tapes. Yep, looks like he slipped on a knife. So, the fact that you need a patsy would be ridiculous. And you could have extracted all the scientific knowledge out of this guy's brain, implemented into fake memory to be encoded, put it on a timer so even the person who had it didn't know, and let him go off world. The idea that you needed Starfleet to smuggle this off of here was just ridiculous.
I refuse to put that much effort into thinking about the episode because they didn't put that much effort into making it. That's my hot take.
Yeah, well,
the plot was an excuse to do a noir story in space. That is what they wanted to do. They wanted to do the Maltese Falcon by way of Voyager, and that's a fine idea and concept. But like the other fine idea and concept they had over the season, which was Learning Curve, they stuck it on fucking Tuvok, which is always a terrible fucking idea because he's your one character that can't emote, that can't actually have like breakthroughs and revelations and take you on a journey with him. He's the one guy who's incapable of doing that by design. So they gave the detective story to the guy who's going to be least interesting doing a fucking detective story, and they didn't get around to it being a detective story until I'd say a third of the episode in. So by the time they actually get going with that, there's only 30 minutes left in the episode. I mean, it's a shitty story. It's boring. There's a ton of bad design on all fronts, and on top of that, the story makes much sense. And yeah, LeVar Burton need an excuse to leave Reading Rainbow to do noir.
I want to jump in our comments section where he'll is that Dahaka Jack? Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Says it's telling that in the 20 plus years after Star Trek Voyager, I couldn't have named any of the non-cast aliens from the first few years of the series. The only ones which stuck was Species 8472, which was a latecomer. So are you going to include even the Kazon in that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I definitely remembered the Kazon, and I definitely remembered the Vidians. And then the Ocampans.
That's a crew member. I mean,
Yeah, I guess, okay. But the Kazon and the Vidians I remembered. I remembered the Kazon because they seemed like Klingon ripoffs. Don't get me wrong. I didn't remember.
Kmart Klingons use the correct terminology.
Sorry.
And again, the sad part here is there's a lot of wasted potential. The Vidians, and we've got more episodes to come with them, and hopefully they can kind of redeem themselves a little bit. But certainly the Skeevians, I've thought a lot about the Skeevians, and I think you could have done some really excellent things with them, but just never happened.
Lost opportunity.
Let's go for something a little bit more upbeat here. Well, we got the one question here. What's the worst alien wardrobe? I think that one doesn't even need to be asked.
I think we just asked and answered.
Yeah. Let's go the opposite direction here. What do you think the coolest scene we saw out of season 1 was?
Coolest scene?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go with the scene that like stuck with me. That like I remember the most vividly and was like I think the most dramatically interesting. And that is when Janeway has her first confrontation in person with the Fidians in the episode The Phage. I think I expressed at length how much I liked it when we did the episode about that. I then, went into a rant about why that episode, the whole episode as a whole, kind of bothered me because it was stupid Janeway just juxtaposed with awesome Janeway. But that whole scene was top notch. I mean, she fucking killed it, and it really like put the dilemma that she's in out there by her fucking self.
So to refresh the audience's memory on this one, the Voyager had finally captured the two Vidians who stole Neelix's lungs.
Snarf.
I'm sorry, Snarf's lungs after he was snarfing around out of bounds. And the whole scope of what the Vidians' deal is with the phage, why they're stealing organs and all that other stuff gets laid out. And it's kind of this Kevin Uxbridge moment, if you remember that out of Star Trek Next Generation, where like the scope of the crime is just so broad that a Starfleet captain has no chance to even attempt to judge it, let alone try and punish it. And her only option is really just to let these
monsters go. She doesn't want to let them go, but her other option is basically summary execution, which she's not willing to do. And there's a lot of gravitas in the scene. Now, the most popular one in the chat right now is the Cathexis fight scene, and I definitely think that was rad. But that phage scene, I think, had dramatic chops in it. I would even make the Cathexis my number 2. My number 2 would definitely be the last scene from Eye of the Needle when Tuvok lays down that the Romulan scientist wasn't going to survive long enough to deliver their messages. And it's very nonverbal, and it's a lot of reaction shots, and then it's the role reversal of the doubters versus the believers. And I thought that was dramatically well constructed as well.
I put my coolest scene as the Chakotay possession bridge brawl, which is the Cathexis thing. Star Trek never has good physical fights. Even the movies, it really takes a lot to do something impressive. Like certainly the J.J. Abrams Kelvin universe is a different story, but Star Trek never quite sells it. So yeah, the fist fighting and the wide phaser usage and the back and forth and the chaos of it all, that was a really good scene. It was amazing that it came out of actually Voyager. I'm going to put my my runner up, jumping over to what was a Seska one? State of Flux.
Yes.
The disaster over and on the Kazon Nistrum ship, where you've got some really choice industrial accident action going on with Kazons fused into the bulkhead, radiation spilling everywhere.
Yeah, you love those industrial accidents, and
it becomes a really cool prop that they use with Seska trying to return to the scene of the crime and clean up after herself. A lot of good potential there, and they realize on it hard.
The weakest shit award was one you felt strongly about.
Very strongly. I think if any award is the most appropriate for Voyager, it's got to be this one. It was weakest shit award. Was born out of my growing outrage for a very specific moment, to the point where I was like, we need to just do awards across the board. What was your weakest, your greatest example of weakest shit?
It's hard to pin down exactly what point in the episode best qualifies for the weakest shit. I'm gonna go with the ending of Time and Again. That whole episode typifies the weakest shit for me.
This again is the candy corn tragedy.
Yeah, the candy corn tragedy. The ending of that episode is the weakest shit, because the ending is Janeway shoots the time bubble with her phaser, and that's it. Everything gets reset back to normal, and none of it ever happened. You have all this buildup that they're, like Kes has got something to do with making it so that this paradox doesn't repeat itself. And then in the end, Kes has nothing to do with that whatsoever. The whole sequence plays out again exactly the way you would expect it to cause a problem. And it just doesn't cause a paradox that time for no reason that gets explained. It's just over. Like the rest of the episode, just there's this wet fart. And that typifies the weakest shit.
It's an excellent point. And yeah, I actually forgot about just how bad that was. But that whole episode,
it was weeks ago now, right? Like, it's not in our forefront anymore, but that stuck with me.
Yeah.
Sat in the back of my brain.
That whole episode was garbage, though, so the whole thing got written off, and I couldn't really get mad about it because you knew that there was going to be no saving that. I want to go back to Jatral, which is
missed opportunity is the episode.
Yeah, because that whole episode had the potential to be nothing but excellent. You had A+ acting, you had a really strong premise. You could have gone a lot of different directions, and just writing a hamstring the whole time. The last scene where the cat's out of the bag, Jatral really is guilt-racked. He regrets what he has done, and he has basically dedicated what's left of his life into trying to undo it. The guy has a super solid scientific theory that they could Dr. Manhattan all of the people he vaporized back together using the Federation transporter technology. And he's basically on his hands and knees and begging Tuvok and Janeway, please let me try this. It takes Neelix being like, well, hey, come on. So they give it the old college try, give it one shot. They get like 75% of a Talaxian test subject formed. They lose the signal, and they're like, you know what? We tried, and wouldn't you know it, the math just isn't good. And it's like all the shit that they have just jammed themselves into, all the situations they didn't belong in, all the cockamamie Hail Mary science that they pull off under the gun, and the massive feats that this ship has been able to accomplish. And they give it the most weak, limp-wristed attempt to save an entire world possible. And it just flies in the face of everything that they've shown you that Starfleet and the Federation is about. It was a hurdle I just couldn't get over. And I can't forgive the crew.
Yeah, considering how much time, like as you've explained, that they spent, this guy had a solid idea behind it, and that in the scene it almost works. Like it the first bare effort they made, like they kind of got it to half work. That like they're like, oh no, it's just impossible. We're not even going to try anymore. It just
nobody in that transporter room even had a blue uniform. You didn't bring a single science person. Well, if the tactical officer and the captain can't pull it off, I guess it's just beyond our comprehension. And I thought there was a couple other missed opportunities there in that episode too. Specifically, they're hanging out over Talaxi or whatever the hell it's called. Like, this is Neelix's home.
Yeah.
I thought it would have been cool, like, he didn't have a fork in his road and be like, well, you know what? I'm back here. Do I want to keep going forward, or is now a time to, kind of reconcile my past and try and strike out. And it would have been a good character development moment for him to be confronted with the option of, I'm home, what do I do? And also, I want to just throw in here real quick, like, what was Cathex or Jatral? That was episode...
That was the second to last episode of the season,
So that's a whole season of Voyager flying from wherever the hell Caretaker Relay was, and only now getting to where his homeworld was. Like, Neelix was far away from home. Like, that's some real scale, I think, to show you what we're dealing with in the Delta Quadrant here.
Yeah, considering his little shitty little ship probably didn't go as fast as Voyager, albeit with less, diversion.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a question of the audience. Hey, Stevie. Hey, baby. Darling. Hey, Steve. I was trying to get your attention to this, babe. What? Do you want to participate at all?
Just put her on the spot, Joe.
Oh, God. I was going to ask her what she thought the weakest shit was, but she was watching some weeaboo shit.
You knew what I was when you married me.
That's true. It's been fun watching it with her because, I have an impeached viewpoint. I'm a Trek fan. I've seen all of this. You have an impeached viewpoint. You're a Trek fan and hasn't seen any of this. She's barely watched any Star Trek at all. And so she's watching it more in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm. Average Joe.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see how that might have been received, given, ultimately that's what they were trying to go for when they made the show. Like, the UPN was attempting to make this the anchor of their network. They wanted people, quite frankly, like Stevie, to watch it. A woman, they really were obviously trying to appeal to a mass demographic, not just nerdy dudes, by having a female captain. I mean, I think that was a conscious choice on their part, and I think that was a interesting one. I'm excited about, like, when we get to some really good stuff later on, but man, the slog that we went through.
You asked a question to the audience. What did you guys think the weakest shit of the season was? And while we're waiting for some responses to come in on that, Joe, what did you think the worst line of the season was? Worst line of dialogue?
Worst single line of dialogue?
Yeah. I'll go ahead and jump on with mine while you think about it, because that's when
Please
I really
do.
put some thought in. This was going to be out of Emanations, the beginning, where it is the biggest waste of potential of the entire season. You could have had space spider caverns for the ultimate dungeon crawl. Instead, it's the teleportation receptacle of, what do we call those guys? Kevorkian buttheads?
Yes.
So when the Kevorkian buttheads die, they get in their poo pods to be whisked away into the next life. They end up there. And so, they're walking around. What you think is like really cool spider wrap victims is really just dead guys decomposing. But right in the beginning of the episode, they beam onto this thing because they find some new Delta Quadrant element. And Chakotay gets out his Native American jump to conclusion mat and decides that this is a very careful burial ground and that it shouldn't be disturbed. And the Federation of Technocrat Scientists on an exploration trek, he makes a recommendation that not only do they not disturb anything, but they go so far, the literal line is, I recommend we make visual observations only, no tricorders. Not even passive scans. Like, what? You're all scientists, and you're not even use your passive tricorders. And of course, that little line there will go on to haunt Harry Kim the rest of that episode because he doesn't have any of the information that would have made things very easy for him.
I think that that's not the weakest line. Like, there are some real clunkers. I will go to Chakotay for mine. It will be in Parallax, so it was the first full episode after the pilot. And when two Maquis, Seska, and Random Dude suggest to him that they're ready to revolt against the Starfleet crew for having B'Elanna imprisoned for punching Joe Carey. And he like stops at the doorway and says, "If you talk like that again, I'll have you thrown in the brig." And he says it with the authority of a substitute teacher. Like he says it with the authority of somebody who's like threatening to send you to detention. But you know he's not going to because he doesn't care that much.
Yeah, well, that was a good moment of personal growth for Chakotay because I think that he like walked on that turbolift. It's like, God, man, I really sounded like a chump there. You know what? Next time they're talking about fucking mutiny, I just need to lunch punch. Yeah. I'm gonna lunch punch people right out of the chair. I don't care how many Cardassians rape their wife. I'm gonna knock them the fuck out. We got some.
We have some responses for the weakest shit. We see Cabrith's the weakest shit for me is always the jump to conclusions reasoning. So for me, it's Chakotay's spirit map making sense to the Doctor. That was bad shit. Dr. Hackajack, weakest, not leaving the energy sucking nebula ASAP.
Which time?
The cloud. In the cloud.
Which time are we talking about the Voyager rolling the dice on some silly situation where they think they can get ahead, failing, losing energy, and then going right back in?
Okay. Can we remark on the fact that we've done this live stream for 46 minutes and we have not yet mentioned the cloud, possibly like the most hilariously bad shit we watched. Like I think it's not on our worst because it amused the crap out of us about how bad it was.
This was for everybody else. This was the Tom Paris sex dungeon.
Well, I mean, let's put it in context, Peter. This was the episode that was like 4 B plots. It didn't have like a coherent structure. It was Tom Paris's. It was Big Tom's discount sex barn on the holodeck, where he creeped in. He B&E'd into Harry Kim's bedroom to show him his sex toys.
Mm-hmm.
You had Neelix starting his hobo kitchen, and Janeway wanting coffee, and not having to resort to eating Talaxian space rat a la mode or whatever the fuck he was making. And some cockamamie explanation from the Doctor about how they were going to like suture this nebula that they accidentally broke into that was actually a giant space baby. It was terrible. It was terrible, but the Tom Paris shit saved it because it was so bad.
Your recap, I kind of wish I still had roommates or I was still going to a lot of conventions with my friends or something, because from henceforth, I got a new word. It's going to be pulling a Paris. And that's pulling a Paris is when you creep up on someone's bed and then nudge them awake to tell them about a sex fantasy or show them a sock that you've been beating off in. And I think in the right kind of like...
It's something you should have done that in your frat days, my friend.
Dude, I'm telling you, that would be the best like fraternity hazing thing possible. Like, on Wednesdays of Hell Week, we go in the pledges room and pull a Paris.
Oh, man.
All right, who we got next? We got, not leaving the energy-sucking nebula ASAP. Some classic Janeway there. Ian Paxton, Janeway's treatment of the Prime Directive, always infuriating.
Always.
And the problem is there's so many of them, it's hard to nail down one of those. Jess McConville, who just joined us, weakest, Chakotay, always. What the fuck, dude? Again, Chakotay got some pretty good brownie points in my book. He fucking lunch punched Dobie in the mouth, so that was a strong
Ian
play.
Falcon punched him. Let's be clear. It was just this weird left hand stage punch that looked like it would never have had the result that it had.
Yeah,
which is why he had to use his Indian powers.
He put his ass into it. And then we also got a good call out on the general weakness of Voyager, which is a failure to communicate. When people have really good reasons and ideas, instead of just being upfront and being like, hey guys, here's this thing I'm dealing with. Everybody's got to play games to make a melodramatic episode out of it.
I mean, I actually Hackajack. I'm gonna say that the Tuvok is this Romulan from the past thing. Not bringing that up is 100% valid in terms of like the in-episode logic of why he didn't, because they didn't know he was from the past until he was there, and then B rather, when they figured out who he was, it was at the very end of his time there, because he didn't tell them their name until after they were done with the discussion in the conference room. So he had very little opportunity to even know he was from the past, even less opportunity to look up who he actually was. And then there was the issue with the temporal prime directive, which Tuvok may actually care about. We know Janeway doesn't care about the prime directive, but Tuvok probably does. And therefore, that's why he didn't say anything.
And that makes me even more mad, though, because prime factors, again, Tuvok shows that in a push-come-to-shove situation, despite whatever he says in Learning Curve about, being a stickler for protocol, Tuvok breaks the fucking rules on, like, an epic scale.
Oh, that's one thing to do it. It's one thing to do it for the fucking Maquis Breakfast Club, and it's another thing to break time. There's stages here, I
disagree. Out of all the shit that Tuvok's pulled, if I was Janeway, I would still say the Time's needle or the Eye of the Needle was his worst transgression.
And Hackjack, in response to what you just said, he obviously didn't trust Janeway with decisions about Prime Directive.
Yeah, he's pointing out. That's my comment during that episode. Let Janeway be the one to make the call. Put the options on the table. Let the captain choose, and that's the second time he decided that he knew better than she did. Joe, we covered the worst line. If you could, what would you call the best line of the season?
Best line of the season?
Yeah, it's another one you might want to think on. Do you want me to jump on with mine?
Yeah, if you got one, yeah. I have a couple options in my head. Let me ruminate while I listen to you.
I'm going to have to go with Seska Burnqueen, man. When she jumps off on Chakotay's ass with, why don't you go talk to your animal guide and figure it out? Like, as hard as Chakotay blasted Dobie in the mouth, Seska came out with a roundhouse kick to his dome. That's my first one. My second one actually was Chakotay from that same episode of, what was that episode called? Whatever. When he busts out you were working for her, she was Tuvok was working for Janeway, and Seska was working for the Cardassians. Was anybody on that ship working with me or for me? A lot of emotion behind it, and a really good character growth moment for what was one of the weakest characters on the show up to that point.
Chakotay had a great episode with State of Flux, no doubt, and those are good, worthy choices. But Peter, the best line. The best dialogue in the entire season.
You fucking say that shit about the womb.
No. The best dialogue of the season is Crewman Dolby.
No, come on,
Tom's laying out for Tuvok that he watched his wife be raped and murdered. Like, that was amazing. That was a showstopper.
I thought it was going to be Harry Kim's womb talk.
No, actually, Peter said the same thing. So my wife thought it was going to be Harry Kim talking about being in the womb too. Just so you know, you two are on similar wavelengths. But yeah, the number one moment exchange and dialogue is Crewman Dolby I was living on this planet, and I'd settled down, and I found peace, and then my wife was raped and murdered by Cardassians, and so I hate them. That was absolutely amazing. That was startling. I loved it.
Well, speaking of Cardassians, let's jump over to another big favorite in the vote for best use of my favorite character on Voyager, Cardassian Hallway.
Let's give it up for Cardassian Hallway. It was MVP of season 1 for sure. It just time and time again, it was ready to perform. It was ready to deliver. What's your number one?
I'm gonna have to go with the secret Vidian entrance from Phage. While mucking around a very 90s made-for-TV cave, they end up shooting a holographic wall and creeping into a very tech-heavy secret layer of the Vidians, which was, of course, a reused hallway from Time and Again, the Candy Corn Tragedy, where Janeway saves the day by shooting static warp bubble with a phaser or whatever that bullshit was. Your weakest shit award.
Yeah, it was the weakest shit is what it was.
What about you, Joe? What are you giving it to?
It was for sure the best part of Time and Again. I'm gonna give it the nod because the early performances of Kardashian Holloway are rarely appreciated, and it was the high point of an otherwise low episode. It really conveyed that we're in a power station feel, had some good lighting in there.
We're no longer in Southern California. We are definitely in a power station.
Yeah, we're definitely no longer at a Southern California water treatment plant like we've been for the rest of this episode, wearing some discount Kwanzaa gear we got at the dollar store.
So you're saying that you were into Kardashian Hallway before it was popular. That's very hipster of you, Joe.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, it's got to be the only saving grace of that episode. I mean, talk about the weakest. I keep thinking about it. Like, the aliens were just humans. They didn't have any shit on their forehead. They didn't have any weird shit in their hair, like a cat toy in their hair. They were just humans in crappy clothes. That's what they did. And then they just shot it at that water treatment facility and gave the guys batons and Glocks and called it good.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Joe, what are you going to do with your worst justification for violating the Prime Directive? Because that happens a couple of times. Let's recap real quick. We've got, of course, the caretaker incident where Janeway decides that rather than just teleport the ship home once they study caretaker station, she decides to blow it up to keep it away from the Kazon. You have, of course, the candy corn tragedy where an entire planet's going to die, and now all of a sudden she's got morals, but then later goes on to reveal the plot anyways. What else we got?
There was stealing the technology, or getting the technology to go home from the Skevians.
Right. There was Harry Kim shattering the belief structures of the Kevorkian buttheads with...
Wasn't Janeway's fault, though. I'm
not blaming this on Janeway. I'm just saying justification for violating.
Just worse justification.
Yeah, many people violate the Prime Directive in season 1 in a plethora of opportunities.
I'm trying to give Harry Kim a pass in that episode because I will defend that. I will be the world's biggest defender of that episode. I loved it. I definitely I'd say it's number 2 on my list of best episodes.
Is anybody in the chat room willing to put Emanations in their top 2 for season 1? Show of hands.
Please, someone bail me out. Someone.
Mm-hmm. Joe, I don't see the chat room either.
I loved it. Number 2 for me for sure.
What else? What other good Prime Directive violations do we have?
Yes, McConville just came through for me. I have one other defender of Emanations in this goddamn chat room, Peter. You cannot take that away from me.
I'm assuming that there was a PayPal payment that was just made from you to Jess. I think you just bribed somebody.
That may have happened. What were we? Oh yeah, breaking the Prime Directive. We had what else? What Prime? Let's ask in the chat if there's any Prime Directive breaches that we have failed to mention. I think we've got 4 so far. Trying to think if there was any in the later episodes. I don't think there were.
I'm looking.
Seska. Seska was breaking the Prime Directive in State of Flux. You call that a breach of the Prime Directive?
I don't think that was a Prime Directive issue because the Kazon were a post-warp society. She was breaking Starfleet protocol rules and certainly violating, the captain's domain, but I don't think she was actually breaking Prime Directive.
I don't think that the Prime Directive necessarily has anything to do with does it always have to do with a warp capable civilization? I know that not interfering with a non-warp capable civilization is part of it, but as my memory serves, in the episode of Enterprise, I guess that would come later though. Like there's an episode of Enterprise where like the foundation of the Prime Directive is set, and the rationale behind it is very much rooted in a incident of actual biological evolution causing one race on a planet to die out, and instead of and helping that race would cause another to be subjugated rather than be allowed to evolve. But I guess I don't know. I would qualify the whole thing with the Kmart Klingons to be a Prime Directive issue.
I disagree with you on that one. And I think by that, then the actions that were taken at the end of Jatral would have classified as a Prime Directive violation, than to using the transporter technology to undo something, and they'd make no mention of that up there.
Oh, Ian Paxton's also backing me up on emanations, so
that's Jess and Ian, who have now both been written off my good opinion list. You guys are beats.
Alienation, man, that episode is so cool, and how it's framed, and like really trying to convey how fucked up that situation is. I thought it was really neat, like how they real tight focus and weird like Dutch angles and shit. Like it was like one of the few episodes of the whole season that like they were trying to do shit with the camera. Like at all.
Everything you just said, I heard it in a very sarcastic voice, mocking that episode, and I found myself agreeing with you. Sadly, you weren't being sarcastic. So for the worst Prime Directive violation, I'm gonna go with Candy Corn Tragedy time and again. And I guess it was her not violating the Prime Directive really is what I was sore about there. That she had just come off such a massive violation in the caretaker incident, and then to decide that, you know what, this planet's going to die and we don't care, and now we're going to mosey along until I have this passing thought that, hey, maybe we're somehow causing this, and then all of a sudden we're going to turn the tables. She directly orders Paris, you will not tell these people what's going on. And I think if you're going to take like crimes you can't judge, the Kevin Uxbridge incident of erasing the Horgan with the Husnock.
Yeah. Husnock, yeah.
And the Vidians stealing people's organs and that other stuff, like some third party was to come in and judge Janeway, and like you could have saved an entire planet and you didn't. Like you're guilty.
I think that you make an excellent point that in light of what she did in Caretaker, what she chooses to do in Time and Again makes no sense. She's clearly willing to break the Prime Directive to save people that otherwise would be a violation to save them. But I'd still have to give it up to Caretaker. Nothing. You can't beat the original. They stranded themselves in the Delta Quadrant specifically so she could break the Prime Directive and bail out a bunch of Mayfly space elves from being picked on by the Kmart Klingons. And instead of thinking of a way to have her cake and eat it too, of blowing up the Caretaker array with like bombs and shit that would go off after they leave, or nothing like that. Just like, we're going to involve ourselves in some shit that by our own rules we shouldn't involve ourselves in, strand ourselves here. I know they had to come up with a way to strand themselves in the Delta Quadrant, but I could think of 1,000 better ways.
Literal. I think you and I could sit here and come up with 1,000 good, reasonable reasons to have made the premise of this entire show that wouldn't haunt it. And not only does it haunt it, it's haunting it to the audience. The rest of the crew has seemed content up through season 1 with maybe one example otherwise of times that they just completely give Janeway a pass card on fucking everyone over.
I'm done giving awards to season 1, my friend.
You don't want to go with the shittiest crew member?
Okay, you know what? One more. Let's do the shittiest crew member. Gosh, it's kind of a 2-man race to me. Harry Kim doesn't do enough to really be the shittiest crew member.
Mm-hmm.
He has one episode that's a focus. I really liked that episode, so he's not in the running. It's between Neelix and Chakotay. And between the two, you know what? I'm going to say Neelix. It's not Chakotay. All because of learning curve and that and State of Flux. Like, he has two or three really good scenes in the first season. He does a lot of dumb shit and a lot of wallflower shit, particularly early on. But there, as the season went on, he actually had a few good moments. Neelix had one episode where he was tolerable, and it was really only because he was sharing screen time with like A-list guest talent. And that A-list guest talent carried the scene, and like Michael Jordan and the Bulls, you play with good players, they seem better than they really are. Like, you're catching balls from Tom Brady, you're going to seem like you're a world beater wide receiver. So yeah, Neelix is my worst, shittiest crew member. He served no purpose except to violate OSHA and health code crap. He almost killed the ship with cheese. I wouldn't be surprised if there was like a salmonella outbreak on the ship at some point.
I want to point out he licks his hands while he's preparing people's food. This guy is filthy. You know, he's touching his balls and he's making dough with it.
Oh, hell yes. He's a dirty space cat. And most of the scenes he's in, you just kind of want to just smother him to death with a pillow. And it's just awful.
Let me quantify this question here. I see some activity in our chat. We're not saying who is the worst actor. We're going
that's definitely Garrett Wang is the worst actor on the show. But the worst character is Neelix.
You're going to say Garrett Wang's a worse actor than Robert Beltran?
Yes.
Bold words.
I mean, it's like, what's worse, getting punched in the groin or being stabbed in the eye? Like, both are bad, but one is clearly worse.
Neelix is not certified in safety and sanitation. Neelix is not certified in common sense. That's the ongoing theme here. So my shittiest crew member was also split between Neelix, who, again, I've made the point many times. I think if you were to write everything he does down on paper, it is impossible not to view him as somebody who is actively sabotaging the ship, whether it's through cheese, fungal poisonings, or maybe we should make a list because he's got some really good interrupting a red alert, super critical time to serve hors d'oeuvres.
Yeah, taking hors d'oeuvre service to the bridge.
I'm going to have to make a laundry list for season 2 of all the shit he does, and we'll have to have an ongoing list. My other pick, and I think it's going to be the one I have to go with, is Janeway. Even moving past her initial catastrophic decision that strands this entire crew, you know, it's the conundrum you keep coming back to, that sometimes she's in awesome captain mode and sometimes she is an emotional wreck. So many of the problems that they encounter in season 1 just repeatedly ultimately fall at her feet, that it's very difficult to reconcile how there hasn't been a mutiny, certainly through the Maquis ranks, but even Starfleet. Like, she is bad for business in the Delta Quadrant.
And I can't argue with that. That's the main weakness of the show for me. Akeem Mulgrew a great actress. I've said that many times in many of our episodes. And when she is able to have good material with Janeway, she comes off as an awesome character. Unfortunately, that's very uneven. And there's a lot of times where she is unfathomably shitty at being a Starfleet captain in a way that is almost immersion breaking in its ridiculousness.
Yeah.
I'd say it's a valid choice, but I still think Neelix is probably worse. I will say, though, shout out to a pleasant surprise. Kes was way better than possibly we could have remembered. Throughout season 1, when I think of like the best episodes, best scenes in even bad episodes, it's Kes and the Doctor that are standouts every time.
She holds down the fort in every, like, going through and reviewing my notes. It was Candy Corn Tragedy, which is just a black mark on everybody's record, where she's like in maximum Troy mode, where she's like crying herself hysterical in dark rooms. That aside, yeah, man, she is a righteous paladin, and maybe it's just the times have changed and stuff like that feels better to see, or we're more accepting, but I felt she was a real strong point throughout the entire season, so hats off to her.
Yeah, like I'm a huge Robert Picardo fan, so I knew I was going to love the Doctor, but I did not expect to be like, oh wow, Kes is neat.
Yeah,
like I like the dichotomy they have with their characters. I guess I kind of forgot that this was actually pretty good, because I always was real love Seven of Nine and the Doctor because she kind of takes over that role, obviously, when Jerry Ryan joins the show, and they're great too. But I forgot this was also a good. At least it was great in the first season. So
I want to open up the floor to our audience and viewers out there right now. We're going to move away from our best of, worst of. Any questions or strong observations, things you guys have seen as we've been reviewing these episodes that you think we should have covered, or questions you've got for us?
yeah, and while those are formulated, Peter, I wanted to ask you. It's just a general Trek question that I don't think we've ever discussed, and I've always been interested in your opinion. I never got your feelings on the Trek movie universe. I'm not JJ averse aside because
that's Kelvin universe. So
yeah, Kelvin universe stuff. That's going to entirely. You could do a whole podcast, I think, about that. But like the mainline Trek movies from the TOS 6 through the TNG movies. I mean, what are your feelings on those? I'm a huge fan of a lot of the movies that some people think are bad in that canon. My favorite's definitely Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country. Like, it laps the field for me. But I'm the world's biggest defender of Generations 2, which everyone seems to shit on. So,
Generations was a real hard one for me. If we're going to jump back into the original movies, the Voyage Home, a lot of that stuff I liked for little kid value. Undiscovered Country, obviously huge. I've gone back and tried to rewatch the original motion picture a few times just from the interest in that is really the foundation of what Next Gen became. Will Decker, Will Riker, the Deltoid, the Betas. I mean, there's a lot of concepts in there that got rehashed. There's some pretty interesting stuff along the way there, but Next Gen, again, is where my strength really comes in. I had a lot of angst about Generations. I was real salty they destroyed the D. I read the Star Trek technical manual. I knew the right way to fucking land the saucer section.
Can't let Troy drive, yo.
The bullshit sucker punch that the Duras sisters landed that had some 100-year-old warbird take out a Galaxy class bothered the hell out of me. But
I think the story overall was neat, though. Like, I kind of bought it. I mean, yeah, I agree that they kind of phoned it in the space stuff so they could justify destroying the D, which I don't think they should have done. I mean, I knew why they wanted to, because it looked shitty on film, which is why all the lights are low in that movie. They had to turn down the lights and they built that stellar cartography set and some other stuff to try and hide the fact they're still shooting on TV sets.
Something that kind of boggles the mind the more I watch TNG and then I see this Voyager stuff. The concept of having your families with you in space and all of the problems they run across. So just watching Janeway needlessly endanger her crew. The concept of the D was a real exercise in like the hubris of the Federation to think you could bring civilians onto what is oftentimes called to be a war vessel. Bad call. And I think, bringing the E out, the Sovereign class, gives Picard a lot more options where you're not constantly like, wait a minute, you got kids on board. What the fuck? But
so we have some good discussion prompts.
Just real quick, let me wrap your thoughts out there. Yeah. Generations gets better. First Contact, obviously the best. Insurrection, I really liked it when I was a little kid and it came out. I'm afraid to watch it again because I think it might be really stupid. And then Nemesis, I thought was a great way to end the franchise. I know you weren't really a big fan of it, but it was. I think that would
have been a great movie in the hands of someone who really understood TNG.
Yeah.
It had elements that I think were ready. Tom Hardy is a great actor. Obviously, getting him in Shinzon was awesome. Mm-hmm. Using the Romulans as the last antagonist, like they needed to have Commander Tomalak in that shit. They needed somebody who understood TNG to get that right. And they didn't, so it just wasn't. And it was what they had two of these like stupid insurrection-esque, whiz bang moments just because. But I will say that that's another movie I would defend as not being nearly as bad as some people think. Like I think Generations and Insurrection or Generations and Nemesis were better than average. I think Insurrection was an absolute piece of shit. I'd rank that down with like Star Trek Five in the fucking basement of Star Trek movies. But I think 3 of the 4 TNG movies actually were at least better than average. And First Contact may be the only great one, but I think people rate those TNG movies, I think, a little too low. But we have some quality discussion prompts here. Hackajack Star Trek Voyager in the current day, no dipping into Battlestar Galactica cast, which is fucking mean. What would be the 21st century equivalent of Chakotay's native spiritualism? I love this one. Let's go through it. Let's go through the command
let's clarify. Are we saying what are we what minority are we going to abuse and exploit for a role on a show, or what, you know, could we really do service and flesh out cool?
I think that's up to us. I think we should answer that question based on our level of hate. I know what direction I'm going, Peter. This
is a pretty deep question. I thought for a second he was asking us to recast the entire show, and I was like, I can't do that. I'm going to have to really put some real homework in on this. What's your answer to this question, Joe?
Well, let's recast it. I think you can do that pretty easily.
No, I'm not recasting the entire cast.
Oh, come on,
dude! I need to sit and put real thought into this. If you want to fire a few off, go ahead. But let's stick to the question. The equivalent of Chakotay's native spiritualism.
All right. If we're gonna cop out and we're only gonna do one, I'm gonna say absolutely. I would cast a monotheist, probably a Christian, and that would be like faith in God. Like if we're gonna go down that route, let's make it mainstream faith in a monotheistic God in some way.
So you're gonna go the Mass Effect. What was the name of the chick who dies in one? It's her, the other guy, because she was hardcore Catholic, and they really harped like that. I thought was kind of the low point for Mass Effect 1. I think if we're gonna go for what trendy religious thing we kind of want to abuse and just keep dragging out, I don't know, some yoga, enlightened, pacifistic stuff.
That would be 90s as shit. Like if we're going to make a 21st century version, you know, of like, if the idea is to make it a person that has like novel spiritual beliefs that we do in like a touristy way, I would say a Scientologist. That would be fun as shit. Some Xeno-believing motherfucker who thinks like, oh, I'm in the stars now. I'm going to find the planet that belongs to me and find the Xenu asshole and fucking really give him what for.
Yeah, let me get some more thought on this recasting.
That's too good a question. I'm ready to recast the show, but we'll move on. Maybe we can do that as a bit in one of our actual podcasts.
Might be a good forum post too.
There you go. That would be good. We'll do that. We'll do that as a post in the group. So, episode 14, Faces, was released in May 8th, 1995. Face Off was released June 27th, 1997. How much was John Woo inspired by Star Trek? Definitely not at all.
I haven't seen any white doves flying around any Star Trek scenes. I haven't seen any akimbo style phaser play.
No, I mean, there's some. I think there's some tight possibilities there. You know, let's not hire Quentin Tarantino for the next Kelvin timeline movie. Let's get John Woo on there. Let's get some doves.
The real question to ask between Faces and its connection in other places. Again, we're gonna have to go back into Star Trek Insurrection, which came out in '98, and I don't remember what the hell they were called. The Briar, whatever the bad guys were in Insurrection, were basically the same thing.
The Sona.
The Sona, yeah. So they were the same type of deal where evil, monstrous aliens who were stealing people's skin and grafting it onto them. And I guess what Vidians would have been first, because if Insurrection came out in 98 and Faces was 95, I mean, that's where that ammunition came from.
I think there's definitely a stronger case to be made that they might have been inspired by the Vidians for them.
Absolutely.
Same people were in charge, of the whole franchise, and they just kind of took that idea and went a slightly different direction on it, and boom, I buy that. Next question. I'd love your thoughts on ship design. Non-locking doors aside, I really like the design inside and out of Voyager.
We talk about this in the pilot, man. I think we're both on board that Voyager is a very strong design. So strong, I think that it's clear that the Enterprise E, the Sovereign class, is built heavily on this this dagger-like structure. The Voyager is the first hero ship to feature a abstract bridge, and by that I mean, you don't have a mirror of the con and ops, and then everything kind of symmetrical around the captain. It's different stations, and it looks like real work's getting done with multiple panels. It's also the largest bridge I think you ever really see in a Star Trek. It's multi-level, and surface area or square footage, it's the biggest that they roll out.
To roll around, I love the hot rod look of the ship. It matches. It's supposed to be like a light cruiser that's real fast. The exterior design's great. Now, the interior design, all Berman era Trek, everything looks like it's a fucking conference center on a Holiday Inn.
Yeah.
No getting around that. Voyager, I like that they turned down the white lights and yellow lights for more blues. I think that suits the look. I think the best. Let's segue. I think the best bridge look we ever see in a Star Trek property prior to the JJ verse. In my opinion, it's Enterprise, followed closely by Star Trek VI. The Enterprise bridge looks like, it's asymmetrical. It looks like a functional bridge of a big ship of some way. It almost looks like a submarine, almost like down periscope. Like it obviously that's the one that came last, so maybe they had more time to sort of nuance a look for it. But the whole look on Enterprise, in my opinion, is way stronger than any other Berman era Trek stuff. Sickbay looks great. Like, all of the environments inside the ship look very unique. It's much more metal. It's much more confined. It feels more like this is a starship to me through and through. Voyager, the Defiant, Deep Space Nine, to a lesser extent, but still, and the D all look like fucking goddamn motel conference rooms.
Now, the flip side to this, of course, Jess was talking specifically about Voyager, but one of my biggest gripes about this season, and probably should have been a run-up for my weakest shit award, is just the production completely phoning it in on every alien design out there, with the exception of the Kazon Nistrum ship that we encounter in the Seska episode. All of these starships that we encounter for other races just look boring garbage. It looks like stuff that you could have made out of milk cartons, plaster of Paris, and some watercolor paints. Really a lot of missed opportunities. Does it get better in the later episodes? Do we actually get to see some cool looking stuff other than the Voyager?
No, quite frankly. We see. I take it back. There's an episode where they run into a ship called the Dauntless. That is well designed. Actually, basically, when Federation shit gets on screen, that shit's pretty cool. But when it's in the Delta Quadrant, no, not in my opinion. And I think you hit on a perfect point to maybe wrap up on. If I'm going to define season 1 of Star Trek Voyager with any one sentiment, it's going to be it in. phoning it in on the plots, phoning it in on the third act, phoning it in on character design, on costume design, on alien ship design, phoning it in on structure. Many times these guys fell ass backwards into good story hooks. And only once can I unqualified say that they actually delivered on a quality episode of television through that hook. Every other time I think of episodes that even the ones I kind of liked, fucked it up significantly in some way, usually at the end. With Prime Factors, the beginning being the weak part of that. It's phoning it in, like for a show that had a ton of money, a ton of attention. I mean, millions upon millions upon millions of people tuning into this every week. It was the anchor of a launch of an entirely new network. They really went out of their way to not put in their best effort. A syndicated show that went off the air 4 months before, that was probably functioning on a fraction of the budget, was manifestly better than they were at creating quality television programming that was good from beginning to end.
Yeah. Again, missed opportunities and a failure to deliver. I'm going to say that I don't regret having watched the season, and
Not at all.
The characters, have grown on me. It's cool for me again to not have really touched the Voyager property, to have this time capsule of Berman era Star Trek there to digest and kind of flesh out my knowledge of Federation technologies and little excerpts and quips.
The technobabble has been surprisingly strong.
Yeah.
Just one more time before we head out, I've shared the link to the GoFundMe. Peter and I, in lieu of wanting any kind of donations or support to do the podcast, we are fortunate that we have no need of such things. However, if you have enjoyed the podcast and you are in a giving mood to support what we have done, we would instead ask you to donate to the GoFundMe that I've put into the chat as a way of saying thank you. It's for a mutual acquaintance of Peter and I, and it's certainly a worthy cause given what the Katz and her family are facing. So we thank you for your attention to that, and
review us.
Yeah, review us, please. Share the podcast. Review the podcast on iTunes, on Stitcher, on you give us thumbs up and subscribe on YouTube. Review us on Facebook. Spread the word. The audience has actually slowly grown. Peter and I are really happy to see more and more people tuning in. We're getting close to that. I would say like the 100 constant listeners every episode point. We're for something we just started a couple months ago. It feels good. Keep bringing people in. We're doing this because we like to do it, but we're also like to entertain people. So the more the merrier. Maybe next time we do a live stream, there'll be more than 7 people watching.
Well, big thank you to those 7 for hanging out with us on a Monday night. Anybody out in the chat room got anything you want us to say on the air to be forever recorded in podcast infamy?
Yeah, memorialized on the internet. We'll give you a second to think about that. If you have one hope for season 2, Peter, knowing, of course, we've already seen one episode, what would it be?
God, that was so bad. One good thing to come out of that.
Treat next week, guys. Trust me.
A big thing I wanted to talk about on this, and unfortunately the first episode of season 2 answers it, was, what happens if someone on Voyager wants to get off this crazy train and just say, fuck it, this planet's good enough, I'm going to stay here. I'm done with the number one thing I want to see, other than Jerry Ryan in that cat suit.
You have to wait till season 4, my friend. I'm sorry to say.
I would like to see just good decisions. I mean, you can have bad things happen even with good decisions. That's what the Skevians have taught us. That's what Eye of the Needle showed you, is that you could have people put in their best efforts and things just not go your way. You've got smart people. You got really smart people on this crew. just being needlessly dumb, and it takes me out of the moment, and it makes me groan and roll my eyes. So I would like to see better writing.
Yeah, if what I was going to say is going to kind of be a corollary to better writing, I want to see better finishing. I want to see strong endings. I want to see things not just kind of peter out at the end. Like when I think of all the episodes that we watched, the majority of them, I think if you go back to the episode we did about it, one of my complaints is going to be, and then the episode ends and it's stupid. I just want some episodes that I feel end strong, and unfortunately for us, the 37s did not deliver.
Yeah.
So, my friends, I hope you have enjoyed this little ride with us down memory lane. You are awesome. Thanks for listening. We will repost this as our episode this week to our normal feeds on iTunes and so forth. And you can expect our review of Season 2, Episode 1, The 37s, next Thursday. Not this Thursday, but next Thursday. So until then, this has been Voyager, please. A hateful voyage to the Delta Quadrant. My name is Joseph.
I'm Peter. Joe, good luck on your procedure you got coming up here. We'll all be rooting for you. And I'm not going to say that this is a result of any ill wishes that I called down on you following Faces, but you know what happens when you debate me and try and turn to the internet to tarnish my Star Trek opinion. Keep that in mind.
It didn't work out well.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Peace.